A couple of months ago, I sent out a survey to my audience with two really important questions. First, I asked whether they felt like they earned enough money in order to retire early. And then I asked them how much money they actually made. And what I found super interesting is that a lot of the people who said they did not earn enough money to retire early also said that they earn over $100,000 per year. And this is absolutely crazy to me because I also earn just over $100,000 per year, but I'm on track to retire in my 20s. My name is Charles, and I use this YouTube channel to document my own journey to financial freedom before I turn 30 years old, and hopefully to help regular people reach financial freedom too. And what I've realized is that a lot of people don't think they earn enough money to retire early, but they actually do. So here's what I want to do in this video. First, I want to explain why it probably feels like you don't earn enough money, even though you probably do. Second, I'll explain how much money you need to retire early and how long it will take to get there. And at the end, I'll give you some more practical steps that you can take to retire on your current income. Part 1. Why it feels like you don't earn enough money. A lot of people feel like they don't earn that much money, even though they're actually above average. So here's a metaphor which I think might explain why so many people feel like they don't earn enough. If you're over 6 feet tall in the United States, then you're in the top 15% of people in terms of height. You probably feel like you're tall, and you should. You're definitely above average. And if you're 6 feet tall in Indonesia, where the average height is 5 feet 4 inches, then you probably feel like a giant. And that makes sense. You're so much taller than so many other people around you. But if you're 6 feet tall and you live in the Netherlands, where the average height is 6 feet, then you feel like you just fit in. You wouldn't feel tall at all. And the same goes for money. And that's because we don't compare ourselves to the true worldwide average when we're thinking about money. We just compare ourselves to the people that we actually see. And chances are you're surrounded by people who earn a similar amount of money to you. And you probably live in a neighborhood of people with a similar net worth. It's like being a 6 foot tall person in the Netherlands. You just feel like you fit in. So if you earn $100,000 per year in the US, you're in the top 20% of earners. But if you make $100,000 per year, then you're probably surrounded by a bunch of other people who also make around that much money, or maybe even more. You probably don't feel like you're a huge extra super earner, even though you're actually way above average. And as you advance through your career, this really never changes. Even as you get promoted, you're now just surrounded by other people at a similar level at the same company. You just continue to be surrounded by people who earn a similar amount of money, and you're always looking up to people who earn even more money. So I think this is why so many people think they can't retire early, or why they don't earn enough money to retire early. They feel like they just are normal and they fit in. And to retire early, you have to earn more than average because so few people retire early. But what these people don't realize is the people who retire early don't necessarily earn more money than average. What's more important is that they spend less money than average. But meanwhile, there are people earning way more money than they need who still feel like they don't earn enough because they're comparing themselves to everybody else who's also spending all of their money. So let's talk about how much money you actually need to retire early. How much money you need to retire early does not depend on how much money you make during your career. That wouldn't make any sense. What it actually depends on is how much money you need to spend. Again, this is why the people who retire early are the people who spend less money. They need a whole lot less money to retire, but I'll come back to this in a minute. If you're a high income earner and you spend most of your income, as most people do, then I can almost guarantee that there is somebody who lives on half as much money as you do. So the question is, well, why can't you? So here's a challenge. For the next month, I want you to track every single penny that you spend. And by the way, there's a spreadsheet in the description that you can use if you'd like to. It's totally free. The reason it is so important to know exactly what you spend is this is probably a good approximation of how much money you need to spend in retirement. And this is what really matters. How much money you need to spend in retirement is what's going to determine how much money you need to save before you can quit your job. And the way you can calculate this is by using what's known as the 4% rule. Basically, there was a ton of research to figure out how much money is a safe withdrawal rate. And when I say withdrawal rate, what I mean is what percentage of your net worth can you withdraw every year without worrying about running out of money in retirement. And what a lot of research found is that around a 4% withdrawal rate is usually safe. A little less, closer to 3.5%, might be safer for longer time periods. But using the 4% rule, which makes the math really simple, then what that means is if you have $100,000, you can withdraw $4,000 every year. If you have $1 million, then you can withdraw $40,000 per year. That's 4% of that net worth. So the moment you become financially free is when you've saved 25 times your annual expenses. That's just the math flipped around. $40,000 times 25 is $1 million. $1 million times 4% is $40,000. But if you need $80,000 every year in retirement, then you need to save $2 million before you can retire. And this is actually the real reason that it is so important to focus on how much money you spend and not how much money you make. By minimizing your expenses, you need so much less money to retire. Because if you can go from needing $80,000 per year in retirement to needing just $40,000 per year in retirement, then all of a sudden you need to save $1 million less in order to retire. So your income isn't actually that important. Obviously, earning more money is more potential savings, but what really matters is how much money you need to spend in retirement. And if you earn a high income, you definitely earn enough. The issue is how much money you spend. And here's where this gets really interesting. Because how long it takes to retire doesn't actually depend on how much money you make or how much money you spend. What it really depends on is the percentage of your income that you save. So think about it this way. Let's say one person earns $50,000 per year and they spend $45,000 per year. And let's say another person earns $100,000 per year, but they spend $90,000 per year. Both of these people spend 90% of their income. And assuming they spend the same amount of money once they reach retirement, then it will take them just as long in order to save up enough money to retire. Person B might be saving twice as much money as person A, but they also need twice as much money in order to support their higher cost of living. And there's actually a calculator that will help you play around with this. And this is a perfect segue to a realistic timeline for reaching early retirement. So in this example of spending 90% of your income, then it would take about 46 years to reach financial freedom. And this is about average. Most people work about 45 years and retire in their mid to late 60s. And even if you just reduce your expenses a little bit so that you're spending 80% of your income rather than 90%, then this makes a huge difference on the timeline. All of a sudden, it only takes 33 and a half years to reach financial freedom. But many people can be even more extreme than that. Especially for high income earners, saving over 50% of your income is not unreasonable at all. And when you do this, you're looking at around a 16-year career. So of course, your example will vary and you can play around with the numbers yourself. But let's put some numbers behind this just to make it a little more real. So for example, let's say you have an after-tax income of $50,000 per year and you spend $35,000 per year. Then you could probably retire in around 30 years. But if you have an after-tax income of $70,000 and you spend the same amount of $35,000, then you could be financially free before turning 40 years old. So here are some practical steps that you can take to retire early on your current income. The first thing you want to do is know how much money you spend and how much money you would need to save in order to retire. And then you can calculate how long it'll take to get there. Hopefully you know around how much money you're saving, and you can play with a calculator like this one to account for investment returns. The reason this is so important is some people start making changes before they've even planned it out. Make sure you know where you're currently headed, and then you can adjust from there. Because if you're one of the very few people who's on track to reach financial independence when you want to, then you don't need to make any changes. You're already on track, so just enjoy the ride. But most people are not on track to reach financial freedom when they would like to. And that is when you want to start making changes. One option is to try to increase your income, but for the purposes of this video, I'm assuming that's not an option. So the other option is to play with your expenses. So what I like to do is play with some projections first. Just see what would happen if you saved more money. What difference would it make if you saved an extra $100 per month? What about an extra $500 per month? If you could save an extra $1,000 per month, what difference would that make on when you would reach financial freedom? And what you really want to answer is, what would it take to reach financial freedom when you want to get there? If you want to be financially free in 10 years, figure out how much money you need to save in order to do that. Because once you know how much money you need to save to reach your goals, then you can look at your expenses and you can start to figure out, what changes do you need to make? And again, this is another really important reason that you should track your expenses. So get that budgeting template if you haven't already. If you only need to save a few hundred extra dollars per year, then you can probably find room even in just the small expenses. But if you need to save thousands more dollars per year in order to reach your goals, then you might have to make some more fundamental changes. I've made a ton of videos on this channel about the easiest ways to save money, the most powerful ways to save money, and all of the strategies that I use to save such a high percentage of my income. So definitely check some of those out depending on what you're looking for. But here's what I'll say now. The average income, even for a single person in the US, is around $65,000 per year. And even if you earn just that amount of money, I guarantee you earn enough money to retire early. I've made videos on this channel explaining exactly how to do that. It's absolutely possible. So a lot of people do earn enough money to retire early. That's not the hard part. The hard part is actually making changes to your life so that you reach your financial goals when you want to. If you watch the videos on this channel, then you know how to reach financial freedom. What you might not know how to do is how to make changes in a way that feels sustainable and that makes you feel good. And I know that making changes to how much money you spend and your lifestyle can feel really intimidating. But what is also really intimidating is waiting until you're 70 to have any financial freedom. The real loss is how many hours and how many years of your life you have to spend working that you shouldn't have to. You have to make a decision now that will pay off for decades in the future. And hopefully these videos give you some inspiration to help you do that yourself. And if you actually went through your expenses and figured out what changes you need to make, I hope you realized that you might not need to make as big of changes as you would think. The truth is, you really don't have to be that frugal in order to retire early. I'm going to link a video right here that explains how you could retire faster than 98% of people without being that frugal, and how you could retire on less than $1 million and still live a very comfortable lifestyle. So check that video out next.